Our next guest, Marshall Thompson, is an Iraq War veteran and a peace activist. He has worked as a journalist for the Salt Lake Tribune, the Standard Examiner, and the Associated Press in Jerusalem. He also served as a journalist for the U.S. Army in Iraq, Kosovo, and South Korea. He embarked on a 500-mile peace walk through Utah and made a documentary about his journey. Welcome to the stage, Marshall Thompson.
Thank you so much for being here today. I can't tell you how thankful I am to be with you. I've seen bigger crowds here, but I haven't seen better crowds, that's for sure. In fact, to be honest, the things I want to share with you today, I feel more comfortable sharing with a small group, and I even had my private doubts coming down today if I could share these things with a larger group. So, thank you. Thank you for being here. I think it's important to get a little bit of perspective right now in times like this. In 2003, I attended a protest against the impending war in Iraq at Utah State University. Only a handful of people came out to support peace, but we had well over 200 people there to support war. They wore Bomb Saddam t-shirts, they yelled at us, they mocked us, they tried to take the microphone away from us and push us off our stage. And we yelled back. It was the beginning of a very dark time for our country. And we watched heartbroken as we've seen our nation go down a strange path of illegal war, xenophobia, and torture. But now, today, less than a decade later, we can already see our country is beginning to awake from the nightmare that had gripped it for so many years. I feel more hope right now for an end to the war than I ever have before. And I feel sure that those who put this country on that dark path will face justice in this life. And it's because of people like you showing up today and being the stalwarts and being the backbone. I had to write this down because Kristen says, my wife says I'm not that good at memorizing things. Spending a year in Iraq as a soldier, I came to understand more fully that every act of violence has at least two victims. There's the person who commits the act of violence, and there's the person who is on the receiving end of that act of violence. Both may be burdened and scarred for life, and both may eventually die of their wounds. And so when our country chooses a path of war and torture, we create twice the pain, twice the broken lives, and twice the destruction. And when I think of this, I think of the story of a specialist, Alyssa Peterson, who was one of the first women to die in Iraq. I've told her story before, but I'm going to keep telling it until everybody knows. I never met Alyssa, but there's a couple of very important things that we have in common. We were both Mormons. We both served as missionaries for our church. We both returned home from these missions with a desire to serve our country and join the military. But Alyssa was exceptional. She was a gifted linguist who taught herself Dutch before she even went on her mission to the Netherlands. And she used that gift to learn Arabic so she could serve her country as an interpreter and as an interrogator. But when Alyssa got to Iraq, she found that her country had betrayed her. Alyssa was ordered to participate in an interrogation program referred to as the cage. Our government, to this day, still refuses to tell us what went on in the cage. But what we know from some accounts is that men were stripped, blindfolded, set in front of female interrogators, and then had the blindfolds removed. At which point the female interrogators were supposed to mock the genitalia and manhood of these men. Some accounts we have hint of things much, much worse than that. As Mormons, Alyssa and I were raised to believe that we are all children of God. We believe in the divinity of our bodies and the sacredness of sexuality. And so I understand the betrayal she must have felt when she found that her government was asking her to use her sacred sexuality, that divinity that was within her, as a weapon to humiliate, defile, and torture another child of God. Weak and naive men thousands of miles away acted out of fear and hate and ignorance and ordered Alyssa to abandon her morals, to defy her sense of right and wrong, and to ultimately rebel against her God. Alyssa, however, was exceptional, and she refused to do it. After only 2 days working in the cage, she complained about what was happening and utterly refused to serve. Shortly after that, she was found dead on her base in Iraq. The first story that came out said it was a non-combat negligent discharge. But as reporters dug deeper into the story, it was revealed that she committed suicide. That even isn't certain to this point. It's a shame that we do not know the full details of Alyssa's story. It's a shame that we do not know what went on in the cage that caused this exceptional woman such distress. And it's a shame that we have allowed our country to fall into this kind of darkness. Victor Hugo wrote, "If the soul is left in darkness, sins will be committed. The guilty one is not he who commits the sin, but he who causes the darkness." For Alyssa's sake, and for the sake of all those who've been affected by illegal war and torture, we must prosecute those who cause the darkness. We must govern ourselves, or we must abandon this experiment in self-rule. We must govern ourselves. One of the most painful ironies about this story is that listed among those weak and naive men who caused the darkness and betrayed Alyssa are several of her fellow Mormons. I have to admit that I have cursed their names, and I have hated them. But I want to suggest today that I was wrong in doing so. The reason for that is, right now, our focus must be on justice and not vengeance or retribution. We can't afford to hate the members of the Bush administration who authorized and ordered torture, because that hate will be a barrier to the justice that we seek. Our struggle for justice will be long and hard, and hate is not a good long-term motivator. We must be focused on something nobler than hate. I've often wondered what I would do if I ever had the chance to meet President George W. Bush. I've thought maybe I'd shake his hand, maybe I'd snub him, maybe I'd yell at him. But now, considering the task that we have at hand, I know that if I met George W. Bush today, that I would embrace him as a brother. And that's hard to say, because he too is a child of God. He is an American. He was my president. I forgive him for the pain that his actions have caused me and my family. I forgive him for the pain that his actions have caused the world. Nevertheless, justice demands that he be tried and those others responsible for war crimes. And so despite the seriousness of this topic, despite the pain involved, today is a wonderful day. The sun's out. There's wonderful people that have gathered here today to take on an important cause. We're all here together to make the country a better place. And we're here to ensure that future generations have a good example to follow. We're here to demand justice for the countless victims of illegal war, indefinite detention, and torture. I'd like to share one last thing with you. It's a Mormon scripture from one of our canonical texts. It's called the Doctrine and Covenants. I think it perfectly describes my motivation for being here today and the reasons why I'm speaking out against torture and calling for prosecution of war crimes. And I hope it will inspire other people who hear it to take up the cause. It reads, "We believe that the commission of crime should be punished according to the nature of the offense, that murder, treason, robbery, theft, and the breach of the general peace, in all respects, should be punished according to their criminality and their tendency to evil among men, by the laws of that government in which the offense is committed." And here's the important part. "And for the public peace and tranquility, all men should step forward and use their ability in bringing offenders against good laws to punishment. It's my hope today that we can all come together and use our abilities to bring offenders of good laws to justice and to bring them to punishment, and to do it in a way that is free of hate and focused on peace and justice. Thank you very much.